In this video, I'm going to show you how to decorate this Crown and Booties baby shower cake. And like always, my cakes are already baked, filled, iced, and they are in the refrigerator waiting to be decorated. I have tons of videos showing you how I do that process. All of them will be linked in the description. And I will also let you know how much I charged for this cake. So let's get started. I'm going to start by using an impression mat on this buttercream cake. Now this is iced in American buttercream. American buttercream forms a crust, so this mat will not stick to it. If you're using a different buttercream, like a meringue buttercream, it does not crust. So I'm not sure if you'd be able to do this technique on a buttercream like that. But I'm trying to press this into the icing. That way I can transfer this pattern on here. And then when it ends, I'm just going to continue the pattern all the way to the back. So I started in the very front of the cake, and then I go back one side, and then once I reach the back of the cake, I'm going to start on the other side and go around to the very back of the cake. I do it that way so the pattern is even to the very front, and it usually doesn't match up in the very back, as you can see right here, and that's the back of the cake, so that's okay. So then I like to take my spatula, and I'm just running it under hot water and just pressing down those points that were formed by pressing the mat into the cake, and that looks good. I'm going to put that back in the refrigerator. Now I'm covering this bottom tier with fondant. I do have a video showing you how I do this, and I will link that below. But I'm going to use my little pinch technique to get a sharp edge and use my fondant smoother to smooth out the sides. Now I want to find the front of the cake, which looks most symmetrical, and then I'm going to take my tool and just mark an arrow so I know where the front of the cake is. And I want to start, again, I want to start in the very front. So I'm pressing this into the cake. Now it is hot and humid right now, so I have to do this quickly after I cover the cake because it's going to start to get a little sticky. So I do it immediately after I cover the cake. And again, I'm continuing the pattern down one side and then finishing it in the very back. I'm going to take a wet paper towel and just clean off this cake drum, and that looks good. I'm going to put that back in the refrigerator. Now I have this tape roll, and it is 14 inches circumference, and I use this tape roll only for toppers for my cakes because it's the perfect circumference. So you need to find something that's the right circumference that you can use to wrap this crown around here. This template is 14 inches long and it's perfect, so everything works out. I will link that template in the description. So I'm rolling out this fondant. You can see how thin it is, and I'm using my tool just to trace this on here. I don't really love this crown. It's kind of annoying because there's so many little sections here that you have to trace. And then I'm using that little tip here just to make sure that I have perfect rounded edges, because the way that I cut this out, I don't know, it's not nice and neat and pretty. It's a little weird. So again, I'm just making sure that I trace all of this onto this fondant, and then I'm making it a little taller than it is. So I'm drawing that line past the bottom of it, and then just going to use my ruler to draw another line here. Now I want to add some inner detail. So I'm taking my Dresden tool and I'm just going slightly on the inside of that very top line just to add a little detail. So in those little round sections, I'm going to cover that up with another piece of fondant. That's why I brought it to a point that's going to be covered so you won't be able to see it. But do you see how I'm working in little sections here, and I'm just going really slowly and making sure that I put this little even border all the way around the very top edge of this piece. And then I'm going to take my X-Acto knife and cut this out. Like I said before, this crown is a little bit of a pain in the butt because it has all these little pieces in it, but I'm just going in small sections, starting in the corners and then cutting it out. Start in the corner and come down. So this way I'm not going to drag the fondant. I get cleaner cuts if I just do it in smaller sections. And once I have that completely cut out, I need to take my fingers and my tools and smooth all of these cuts. This is a little time consuming here because all the fondant was a little jagged, so I have to smooth it out. It's going to go on the very top of the cake. It needs to look really pretty. So now I have to wrap this fondant piece around here. So I put that on its side, and it's hanging over the edge just a little bit, so I'm not going to mess up that piece of fondant as I wrap it around here. And I'm getting a little bit of Crisco behind these pieces that are sticking up, and they're going to stick that fondant to the wax paper. That way it's going to stay up and not fall down. So do you see how I'm just trying to push it together, getting a little bit of Crisco behind these pieces that are falling down? And the Crisco, I use Crisco because I can easily remove it and it's not going to have a really strong hold. It's just enough to keep it up so it won't fall down as it is drying on here. So just getting Crisco behind all of these pieces, and then I want to press the seam together and make sure I have to stretch that part up a little bit because it wasn't meeting in the middle. And then I'm getting a little bit of water just on the inside of that seam on both sides. Don't get it on the outside because you'll be able to see it on the fondant. And then I'm just going to press this together. And you see how it's the perfect circumference. I just use this for all of my crowns and toppers that I do. It's just the perfect circumference for the top of my cakes. And that looks good. I'm going to set that aside for a couple days to dry. Now I rolled this fondant out. You can see how thick it is. I want to make the booties. There is Tylose powder mixed into here. I'm doing this a couple days early. That way these can dry really hard. So I have these booty cutters. I will link them below. There's a toe piece at the very top. So I'm just pressing these down into the fondant, and then I'm going to use my X-Acto knife to cut it out. I just find that I get a cleaner cut when I use my X-Acto knife, so I just prefer to do it that way. And then I'm going to set these aside to dry overnight, and this is the next day, and they dried hard, so they're holding the shape. The thinner end is the back and the thicker end is the toe. I just need to remember that. I'm rolling out that fondant pretty thin, and I'm using this next cutter to cut this out. And then I'm taking a ball tool on a piece of floral foam, and I'm just thinning out that bottom section. I'm going to wrap that around the very bottom of that sole, so I need to thin it out so it will just wrap around the very bottom easier. So now I'm getting a little bit of water behind that, and this part's tricky. I'm starting on the toe, and then I flip it upside down, and then I'm trying to pull the one side up the side of the sole. You see what I'm doing? It's hard for me to explain, and then I'm pulling the other side so it's even around there. Now, when you're pressing this down, you don't want to be able to see any wrinkles from the very top of the shoe. This part is a pain in the butt, and it takes a little practice to be able to get it right. But you want those soles to dry really hard. That way they'll hold their shape while you're doing this. Now, I got the other piece here. I'm just using my Dresden tool to make those holes a little wider. And then again, I'm thinning out that bottom section with my ball tool, getting a little bit of water. And then I'm going to wrap this around the back of the shoe. So do you see how I'm doing it? It's a little tricky. I do it differently every time. You just need to be able to wrap this around the very bottom section and try to get all those wrinkles out. So again, like I said, it takes a little bit of practice to get it perfect, but it gets easier every time you do it, I promise. Now I'm getting a little bit of water on the side pieces where it sticks, and you want to make sure that you can get the lace through the holes. So make sure the holes aren't blocked, and I'm shaping this into the correct position. I should put more cotton balls in there so it holds its shape. Now I have this clay gun with the smallest hole disc on it. I'm getting a little bit of Crisco on my finger and just lubing that up. I pop that in the microwave, and I'm sticking that in here. I'm going to squeeze this out. I love this clay gun, and I hate it because it is so hard to squeeze fondant out of here unless it's super soft or warm from the microwave. So you just got to work quickly with it. And then once I have all these laces on here, I'm going to cut it into little sections. So I'm going to start with the back piece first. So I'm getting it through both holes, and I'm making sure that it is straight in the front. Get a little bit of water down and make sure that it is nice and taut, if you will. And then I'm getting a little bit more water down, and I'm going to cut this to size so it meets in the middle, and then just use my fingers and my tools to press it to that part that I put water on. You don't want too much water. You don't want it to show on the fondant, just enough to make it stick. And then I'm going to make the loops. So I'm cutting a little round piece here, and I like to hold it up first and make sure that it's the right size, then trim it to the right size, and then I'm going to get a little bit of water behind the back of the loop and then stick that down to the very center. And I'm just trying to place this on here so the loop looks even on both sides. So I'm going to do the same thing, hold it up, make sure it's the right size, and then once I have that, I'm going to get a little bit of water behind it and stick it down. And now for the tails, I'm just shaping this into like an upside down V, and I'm making the tails uneven. I hold it up, they still look a little long, so I'm just trimming it one more time. And then again, getting a little bit of water behind that point. And then I'm going to stick that down in the middle and use my tools just to make sure it is in the right position. And then I need to make the knot. So what I'm doing is just putting 3 little pieces together and pinching it on one end, and then I'm going to cut it to size. And I like to hold it up and make sure that it is the correct size on that little shoe, and that looks pretty good. And then I'm going to get a little bit of water behind it and then use my fingers and my tools to get this in the right place. So I'm just covering that little part where the tails met the bows, just to make it look nice and polished. And this looks pretty good, so I need to set these aside for a couple days to dry. Just make sure they are in the right position and leave them at room temperature to dry hard. Now I'm rolling this fondant out really long using my ribbon cutter to cut this. This is going to be the bottom section of the crown. I'm going to put my rulers here so everything is straight, and I'm just taking my Dresden tool. I'm adding a little line detail, kind of like I did with the very top. It's a little hard to see, but I'm just coming in about like a quarter, an eighth of an inch, just to add some line details here, using my rulers to straighten it out. And then I got that was drying for like 2 to 3 days, and I removed that. I can still kind of move it into the right position. So I just want to make sure that it dries to the right shape, and then I flip that over, get a little bit of water behind it. I'm going to wrap this around the very bottom of that crown, and then where it meets in the back, I'm just going to cut off the excess fondant and then press the seam together. And now I'm making the gem detail, so I have this gem mold, and I'm just getting a little fondant in those cavities, and that's the perfect size there. So I made 4 of them, and I'm getting a little bit of water behind each one and sticking these down, and that looks pretty good. I'm going to set that aside again for another day or 2 to dry. Now I have a piece of non-slip pad underneath my cutting board, an X-Acto knife with a wet paper towel, a Dresden tool, a little bit of water, and I'm doing my trace cut and smooth technique. She wanted that font on there. I had to print that out the correct size to make sure it would fit in these little plaque cutters. So that's what I did. And now I'm going to trace these onto this fondant. Now I rolled that yellow fondant out, let it sit for like 20 minutes. So it's really stiff. So it's not going to drag when I cut this out. So I'm taking my Dresden tool, tracing the letters on here, and then I'm going to cut all the letters out. And then after I cut letters out of fondant, I like to smooth my cuts just because, like I did with the crown, the fondant is usually going to be jagged once you cut something out, and you need to take your time to make it look nice and smooth and pretty. Now I'm just using these cutters. These are plastic cutters. They don't cut really well. So again, I'm just making the impression, and then I'm going to take my X-Acto knife and cut these out so I get cleaner cuts. I got those cutters so long ago. I have no clue where I got them, but you can find plaque cookie cutters, or you can print out a plaque the size you want it to be and then just trace it onto the fondant like I did with the letters. Now I want to get an even gold border around these, so I did not glue that blue fondant down. I'm just making sure that I do not move that fondant. I want to keep it in place so I can get an even border around this entire thing. I'm going to be painting this gold, but I can't paint it gold after I glue down the blue piece. That's why I try to hold it in the correct spot while I cut it, and then I can smooth it out and paint it gold. That way I'm not going to get any gold on the blue. It's kind of a pain in the butt, but whatever. Now I have some Rolcom Super Gold, getting a little bit of that powder in the cup, adding some lemon extract, and I'm stirring this together, and then I'm going to paint these gold. So the plaques and the letters are going to be gold, and whenever I paint anything gold, I need to do 2 coats because the first coat kind of deepens it up a little bit, but the second coat really makes it look like a deep gold. So the lemon extract evaporates really quickly, and by the time you do your second coat, the first coat is dry, so it's perfect. I like using it for that. Now I'm getting a little bit of water behind the blue piece, and then again trying to set this on here so that gold border is even around the entire piece. And then I need to put the letters on here. Now when you're putting letters, gold letters, on a different color fondant, the gold tends to transfer, so I need to be really careful with it so I don't get gold on, like gold dust on the blue. So I'm trying to get the letter in the correct position first, and then I press it down. So this does take a little while longer to do when you have gold on a different color because you don't want it to look sloppy. If you get some gold on the fondant, you could take a little lemon extract and remove it, but I just try to make it as neat as possible. And that looks good. I'm going to set that aside. Now I am stacking the cake. I do have a full tutorial where I go into detail on how I stack cakes, and I will link that in the description, but these cakes are just out of the refrigerator and they're cold and hard, so I'm not going to mess it up as I do this process. And then I have this gold bling, and I'm going to wrap it around to see how long I have to cut it, and I'm cutting each one to be 4 rows high. So I'm doing this around the top and the bottom tier. Then I'm getting a little bit of
well, it's a lot of piping gel. I want a glob here, so I'm going to start half on the glob and then wrap this around the cake. I'm not putting anything else behind that, and then cutting it to the correct size, and then I'm going to press that other end into the glob of piping gel. Glob sounds weird, but it is a glob, and it holds it in place. I found that this is the easiest and most effective way to be able to wrap these bling borders around the cake so they stay into place. Just pressing that into the piping gel. Now I'm getting some icing behind the center of the plaques and a little bit of piping gel around the edges. The icing really helps it adhere to the cake, and the piping gel around the edges makes it so the icing doesn't seep out the sides. And that's a little extra of me, but that's just the way that I do it. And I'm trying not to transfer any of that gold onto the blue fondant. That's why I'm putting it on here like that. And now I'm getting some piping gel in the lid and getting some gold dragées in there. And I'm just going to, one by one, take my tweezers and put these on here. Yes, I know there's a dragé gun. You could do it that way. I just like to do it this way. I like to place each one individually, so that's what I do. And this looks pretty good. I'm going to put that back in the refrigerator. Now I need to paint this gold, so I'm putting that on a paper towel. I'm taking a paper towel to remove any of that Crisco that was on the inside, and you need to make sure that you paint everything on here. So I'm painting the inside and then also the top edges of the fondant that are sticking out, and then I go ahead and do the very front. So again, like I said before, you have to do 2 coats of here. The first coat isn't going to look nice and pretty, and that's okay. I try to remove as many brush strokes as I can so it looks really nice before I add the second coat, so I'm going to set that aside. Then I was so annoyed, I remembered that I needed to make these laces navy blue. So I just removed these and I'm going to paint these gold first. Again, I'm doing the very inside of the booties, and then I'm going to do the outside of the booties and 2 coats of this. So the first coat isn't going to look really nice. And then once that coat is done, I'm going to add a second coat to both the crown and to the booties. So this time I want to make sure that you really can't see brush strokes. I'm trying to be really precise with this so you can't see the brush strokes and everything looks nice and pretty and polished. And now let's decorate the cake. So I got that out of the refrigerator. I have some piping gel here, and I'm sorry, I'm right-handed. I couldn't do this for the camera, but I'm getting piping gel all along that bottom rim of the crown, and then centering this on the very top tier and pressing that down, and then getting a little bit of icing underneath each of these booties. That way they're going to stick to the cake drum and not move around. And here is the cake. How cool is that?
So there you go. How adorable is this cake? Now this is actually a redo of a design that I made before, and she wanted something similar, except we were to eliminate the bottom tier. Now this cake on the inside, the top tier is a 2-layer torted 6-inch, and the bottom tier is a 2-layer torted 8-inch. And I do have a video where I talk about when I tort and when I don't tort my cakes, and that will be linked below. It feeds 30 to 40 people. And how much did I charge? This one was $400. So I think that's it. What new techniques did you learn in this video? I would love to know. Leave it in the comments below. And just a reminder, I have ebooks with all of my recipes. There's my signature scratch pound cake recipes, my best Dr. Cake mix recipes, my buttercream icing and filling recipes, along with my favorite numbers and my favorite fonts. So they are all linked in the description. And I do have a Cake Academy membership program where I can help you elevate your cakes to the next level. All of that information is below. Please like this video if you liked it, and if you're enjoying my tutorials, I'd be so grateful if you could buy me a coffee. My link is down below. And I would love it if you would keep in touch on socials, and you could check out my website. And if you want to stick around, you can watch this video next and hit subscribe and the bell if you haven't already. Thank you so much for watching. I love you guys, and remember, it's cake, have fun. I will see you on the next one. Bye.